The hearing will come to order. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Duarte. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this what? Wrong button. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all of our guests here today testifying. I want to talk to Ms. Areola and Ms. Williams. Is this the first time that you ladies have had a chance to come to Capitol Hill and have our attention and explain what's happening in your districts?
For me, it has, yes.
And Ms. Williams, have you been able to find an opportunity to let us in Congress know how this influx of migration is impacting your district?
I am very thankful for the opportunity to be before you to bring to the attention the misuse or the intent of our national park.
Thank you. You represent districts there in New York. Please elucidate for us a little bit beyond just the national park issue. I'm reading reports, but one of the reasons of these hearings is to get firsthand accounts from folks on the ground throughout the country. What's happening to small businesses around the hotels where migrants are being housed and tourism is being displaced?
Small businesses both around and inside the hotels are closing.
On what scale? What are you seeing?
I would say on a large scale. They've been reporting it on the local news that they just cannot function because of the lack of tourism and the fact that there are so many migrants on the street and in the hotels.
Thank you. And Ms. Williams, what are you seeing along those lines? What other social and community impacts are the large influxes of migrants having? I assume the national park wasn't our first option in terms of where to put hordes of migrants. Where else have they been put, and what have the community impacts been so far in your district?
Did it again, sorry. I heard this on the news, and there was no prior communication from the powers be, and it was very concerning for our community. I have to say that the 59th Assembly District is a very peculiar district. It's a residential area. It's a transit desert. We do not have a train going through our community, period. Our community have some of the most green spaces in New York City, hence Floyd Bennett Field, right? So housing the migrants there, it's almost 2 to 3 miles from anything possible. And we have a mall there. And those people that run that mall, they're concerned because as the colder months come by, darkness comes earlier, right? So people are very concerned, small businesses are concerned, but again, the district that I represent is a very residential one with much of safety concerns at hand.
How about food outlets, services, jobs? Can you elucidate a few of those issues?
Well, as I said, it's a 2-mile radius from where they will be placed, or almost 3 mile. There is no jobs there. There is no food there. There is nothing there but institutions like Aviator and Fresh Meadow Farm for recreational purposes. So all these things will have to be brought in. For them to travel, they would have to travel out of Floyd Bennett Field to go into the bigger population where they can seek those amenities.
So we have a food desert. We have a jobs desert. So SNAP cards and work visas won't remedy these factors easily. We have a transportation problem. We don't have public transportation set up to move these folks to where they can be productive or participate in the economy. So what's the end game? What do we do as, I think this last month we had 230,000 new crossings documented on the southern border, plus gotaways. So we assume it's a higher number than that. What's the end game? How does this end? Because in my district in Modesto, we've got neighborhoods that were formed as, you call them refugee camps or Dust Bowl camps around Modesto, California, where the Model A's just came and parked and people started living there. And now we've got neighborhoods that sprawled up that, not quite 100 years later, 90 years later, that still have no sidewalks. They've never been incorporated. There never was a solution. And now we've got these ongoing problems of these communities that were never planned. How do you see this ending?
I just want to add, as you said, end game. I don't know if there's an end in sight, However, what I do know that needs to happen, that every part of government, federal, state, and city, have to be in communication. You cannot ignore the local government, the local representatives that represent their constituency. These decisions cannot be made at such a level where the local electeds read about it or hear about it over the news.
So have they asked you, has anyone asked you from the federal government as they displace onto the federal park here and other places throughout your community, how they're going to supplement the tax base that has been put, further demands have been put on? Are they going to give you as a city or state government additional revenues to handle the public safety or the lack of tax base that's coming with these new demands?
The gentleman's time's expired. I'll give you.
There has been no
brief more
commitment
attention.
for financial support.
Well, thank you for coming here today. I yield back to the chairman.
Gentleman's time's expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this incredibly important hearing and for you being willing to come in today to talk about these serious issues. Councilmember Ariola, we are very interested in learning more about the public consultation process for migrant camp at Floyd Bennett Field. Just 2 weeks ago, the Oversight and Investigations Subcommittee heard testimony from the Democratic witness about how important it was to, quote, facilitate meaningful public engagement in decision-making, end quote, and especially in, quote, communities of color, end quote, and, quote, low-income communities, end quote, during the NEPA process, because it will lead to, quote, better decisions for the entire community, end quote. Councilmember Ariola, please briefly describe the public consultation process to host thousands of migrants at Floyd Bennett Field.
There was no public consultation no public consultation. There was a letter written to the president by our governor asking for Floyd Bennett. We then asked for a meeting with the governor's office. The governor's office did comply. A meeting was held. The governor was not present. We sent questions beforehand. None of the questions were answered. We followed up 2 weeks later for another meeting. That was on a Thursday. They told us no changes have happened. We don't need another meeting. And on Friday, the lease was signed.
That does not sound to be very meaningful in terms of public engagement or decision-making. Then are there communities of color or low-income communities in the area around Floyd Bennett Field and Gateway National Recreation Area that were consulted?
No, there were no areas at all, whether areas of color, low income, middle income, no areas, no communities, no elected officials. We found out like everyone else did.
So across the board, the Biden administration has totally failed at communicating and working with the community to address the crisis that the Biden administration has created. Is that fair?
It is fair to say he actually visited our city and flew in and out without meeting with the mayor or visiting a shelter.
So I would say that he is not engaged in a meaningful public engagement process. In the process, it seems to me that the Biden administration has also failed to engage with local communities of color, as we've already discussed, and other groups that are impacted by this throughout the area. Is that also fair?
That is correct.
Okay. As a result of the Biden administration not engaging in a meaningful consultation process, they reached a decision that harms your community and has caused great suffering for not only your community, but the people that they're bringing in. Isn't that true as well?
Yes, it is.
You know, Councilmember Ariola and Ms. Williams, you've quoted the NEPA handbook where it says that, quote, actions taken in response to an emergency are not exempt from NEPA review, end quote. Now, as a NEPA attorney, I don't agree that this is the way that it should be. I think that there are many situations in my home state of Wyoming where we could have prevented a wildfire, a catastrophic wildfire, for example, if we had not been held up by the NEPA process. But I think it's worth highlighting the double standard that we're seeing here in relation to the invasion on the southern border and the invasion of our cities, such as in New York. If we want to respond to emergencies related to immediate risks of severe forest fire that devastate communities and people throughout my state, we can't expedite the process. Yet when the politics of the situation is magnified enough for the world to see the disaster that has been created by the Biden administration, then what happens? Exactly what's happening with the National Park Service and what you're suffering through in New York. How do you see the politics of this situation creating a double standard for the National Park Service, particularly as it relates to NEPA?
I think that they've given it no thought, no cause, and they're talking about protecting people, but they're not protecting the people that they want to place on Floyd Bennett Field without having these safeguards in place.
One of the things that I think has been so shocking to the American public is in watching the invasion on the southern border. And the southern states, Arizona, Texas, California, and even in my area, have been dealing with this crisis for quite some time. It is now visiting upon other areas, and it is exploding across our country. It isn't just affecting one national park. It's affecting every community. It's affecting every state, and it's affecting the nation as a whole. It's tearing apart the fabric of our society because of these failed policies. I am sorry for what the Biden administration has done to you, and I am sorry for what the Biden administration has done to our country. They should be ashamed of themselves. I very much appreciate your willingness to come here and tell us about the crisis they have created.